Sometimes a single political claim can threaten to unravel a relationship that's been solid for nearly 200 years. And the shockwaves, they're still being felt today. It's one of those statements, right? It sounds simple, it's bold, it's confident, but it's also a statement that runs headfirst into a very, very complex economic reality. So what happens when you actually put an idea like that to the test? Let's do that. Let's dig into the numbers, the systems, and the real-world consequences that pop up when political rhetoric meets deep-seated economic and physical dependence. Now, this wasn't just some throwaway line. No, it was a claim that was repeated, and it really struck at the core, at the very heart of the cooperative spirit that has defined the US-Canada relationship for generations. For what, over 175 years? The whole idea was that this border would be open, predictable. That was just a given. Entire industries, energy grids, complex supply chains, they were all built on that fundamental trust. All right, let's start with the big one, energy. Because honestly, nothing really shows the gap between a political soundbite and hard physical reality quite like this. I mean, just look at this. The sheer scale here is kind of mind-boggling. In 2024, we're talking nearly 2/3 of all the crude oil the US imports coming from Canada. To put that in perspective, no one else is even in the same league. And it's not just about how much oil. This is the key part. Refineries, especially across the Midwest and down on the Gulf Coast, were literally built, engineered over decades, specifically for that dense, heavy crude that comes out of Canada's oil sands. You can't just flip a switch and swap it out for something else. The system just doesn't work that way. And this isn't just an oil story. Look at this. The US gets almost all of its imported natural gas from Canada, and over 80% of its imported electricity. So we're talking about the power that literally lights up our homes and the fuel that keeps them warm. And if you want to put a price tag on it, well, here you go. $151 billion in 2024 alone. This isn't some one-way street. It's a massive, mutually beneficial partnership where American companies get exactly the kind of energy their systems were built for. Okay, so let's move beyond energy because this economic story gets even more tangled up. This is where you really start to see that the two countries don't just, buy and sell stuff to each other. They actually build things together. So you've probably heard people talk about the trade deficit in goods, right? And look, that's a real number, but it's only one piece of the puzzle. Once you add in services, we're talking finance, tourism, software, all areas where the US actually has a surplus with Canada, the whole picture starts to look a lot more balanced. Here's the concept that is absolutely crucial to understanding this relationship. Nearly half of all the trade between the two countries is in what economists call intermediate goods. Think of it this way. These are parts and components that are constantly zipping back and forth across the border multiple times before a final product is even made. It's less like two economies trading and more like one giant cross-border factory floor. The auto industry is the classic example of this. A single pickup truck tells the whole story. You've got steel made in Ontario, which then goes to Ohio to get stamped into parts. Some of those parts might even go back to Canada for more processing before everything finally comes together in Michigan for the final assembly. So if you disrupt that flow at any point, you're raising costs for absolutely everyone involved. So what actually happened when this super efficient, super integrated system got hit with a sledgehammer of tariffs? Well, the shock was instant and the fallout was pretty severe. Yeah, the impact was fast and it was harsh. As soon as those tariffs hit, Canadian exports to the US just plummeted. But that shockwave didn't just stop at the border. The whole system got rocked. Overall, US imports saw one of their biggest drops on record. And pretty quickly, the economic hit turned into a diplomatic crisis. This quote from Canada's Prime Minister, this wasn't just political grandstanding. It was a sign that something fundamental, trust, had been broken between two of the world's closest allies. And you could see that shift in regular people, too. Polls in 2025 showed that a huge majority of Canadians were suddenly against any closer political ties. In fact, many said they'd rather look toward the British Commonwealth than the US. And that feeling had real-world consequences. Canadian travel to the US dropped by a massive 30%. And this wasn't because of a recession or anything like that. It was a choice. Ordinary people were deciding to spend their vacation money somewhere else. So all of this really begs some serious questions about the long-term strategic damage, right? Because sure, economic numbers can bounce back, but rebuilding trust? That's a whole different ballgame. And with the big 2026 review of the trade agreement coming up, the stakes are incredibly high. Economists are warning that if the whole deal collapses, it could shrink both economies pretty significantly. We're talking hundreds of billions in lost growth and higher prices for all of us. And this stuff has a ripple effect around the world. When other countries see the US put the economic screws to its closest friend and neighbor, they notice. They start to wonder if they can really rely on American commitments. They start hedging their bets. So here's the bottom line. The idea that America does not need Canada really just falls apart when you look at the cold, hard economic facts. But the damage done by even testing that theory, well, that leaves us with a really big, lingering question about the future of this incredibly important alliance.